It could all be so simple.
What's up? What's up? Getting back into it. Starting with Deuteronomy 33, verse 2. It say here, and he said, the Lord came from Sinai and rose from Seir unto them. He shined forth from Mount Paran, and he came from the myriads holy. At his right hand was a fiery lot unto them. And we're going to see the same terms, Paran and stuff, as you read on through the ventures as they went up near Moab. So in Moab, they had come over the Jordan in Joshua right after this. So this is the end of Deuteronomy. Right after that, you have Joshua being Joshua, and it don't flow that well, honestly, because what they had done was the Pentateuch isn't really the Pentateuch, and the Samaritans aren't following the original text that was originally the first 5 books were actually without Deuteronomy, but with Joshua, and they added little parts to Joshua that emphasized a little more of the Southern Kingdom's role as they had done in Genesis, especially chapters 14 and 38. So, as we see here, we say he come out from Seir, and no, I do not believe this is like the messianic destruction of Basra or anything like that. No, I think this is talking about where the good guys, so to speak, came from, in as much as Joshua and all them. And so Joshua and all them came from the other side of Jordan, which is Moab. And so when they came out of Moab across the Jordan, that's when they took Jericho. And so I want to talk a lot about something called the Kenites and the Kenizzites, what we see in Genesis 15:19 as part of the Canaanites. The spelling is quite remarkably similar in Hebrew. So these Canaanites, and Kenizzites, are they, as they say in Chronicles, the Rechabites, and as they say in Jeremiah 35, First Chronicles, I think 22, and it wasn't 9, I can't remember. There's something about the Kenites being Rechabites, or the Kenizzites rather. Kenizzites being Joshua being a Kenizzite, and whether or not they're Israelites, Well, if you go back to Genesis 26 and Genesis 36, you can see some of these similar names being used for the descendants of Esau. So is Esau a Gentile? Or, well, if you want to say it's based on the seed, like a lot of y'all do, then if it's based on the seed, then are Jacob and Esau a different seed? And, are Ishmael and Isaac different seed? Well, not according to inheritance, like the law, the Torah would be along the father. They only detail the father's name, but in terms of the seed, you have mother and father. You have two. I don't see how this needs to be discussed any further, but some of y'all seem to miss this. Some would be on the camp of just on the father, just on the mother for ancestry, and no, neither one is right. So we have here the vast majority of people being absolutely wrong about this. Ancestry actually comes from both parents. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to just look and see. And I'm sure they had enough information back then to figure this out, meaning eyes in their heads. And so, the interesting thing about Deuteronomy 33 is one would think that it had knowledge of post Babylon. So, I mean, Moses is, um, that 800 years before Babylon. And and then a lot of the Deuteronomy, you'll see the reforms of Hezekiah and Josiah against those Elohist practices that the Canaanites used that are actually part and parcel for the first um, four books, and not the whole of the first four books in Joshua, but parts of it that they had expropriated as they took the people's land, and they'll make it obvious that they did that right in the text. I mean, in Joshua, and there was hints of it all throughout Genesis of um, favor being taken from one and given to another. And so a lot of the Abrahamic stories, and I think that a lot of them were added because Abraham has a lot of chapters compared to um, some of the other people, even up there more than Jacob, even. And so Jacob was more, as you see in John 4, um, a little further north than let's say Hebron, like where a lot of the stuff with Abraham went down, and um, he was over there with the Hittites and the Hivites and Shechemites. So um, it's not really like when we're talking about where the nitty gritty of true Israel is. These people for the last period of time would be a relatively small amount of small area. It's north of the Edomites, north and west of the Edomites, east of the Philistines, and south of the Assyrians. And so um, a lot of this transpired in this small area kind of between Jericho and Gaza, kind of including Megiddo and a little north of there towards I. And I'm trying to really this is happening too often. Excuse me. And so if I fast forward a little bit up to Joshua, we see here that you see Rahab, and so when we see Rahab in chapter 2 here, this is a Canaanite who found favor. So this the kind of camp that would say it's all genetic is kind of wrong. And here that I think that's why in Matthew, a lot of people miss it that in Matthew 1:5, this is pointing to bringing actual Canaanite. Uh, it says here in verse 1 a harlot whose name was Hidam. And so, I mean, it makes sense that they would want to save her because she had given them life, and I mean, maybe she was pregnant with one of their child that they want to keep her alive anyway. That I mean, this would be more events that come through the father because you have Salmon, wasn't it, who was the Israelite, Boaz, who was an Israelite, and Ruth, who wasn't, and also, I think Rachel had been married Solomon, say, or something like that in Matthew 1. I could go turn there right now if you don't know for sure. But that this would have to come through the male line if it were something we inherited ancestry, but it's actually an inheritance, material inheritance, in as much as goods, is what Matthew was talking about in terms of the kingship of the Messiah. But that was only as was perceived to be the king because Joseph was not indeed his father. So if Joseph wasn't his father, his kingship through David, it was only perceived. It wasn't an actual ancestry. And and you see right here all the talk about the Amorite in chapter 3 verse 10. It talks about the Canaanite, Hittite, Hivite, even though the Hittites had sold them a grave or whatever, and David got down with a Hittite or two, the Perizzite, and that's a weird term because I think uh, in Lot's line and Judah's line there's Perez, and then David named something Baal Perez, which means the Lord of the division, and the Girgashite and the Amorite and the Jebusite, and interesting right there. In the 7 nations armies that they talk about, or 5 to 7 nations, depending on if you go to Exodus 3:17, would be a 5-nation army. If you go to Deuteronomy 7:1, it's a 7-nation army. Excuse the uhs. I gotta stop doing that. Now, I did it again. If you look at chapter 3, verse 10, it is truly not describing the Kenites and the Kenizzites, nations of Canaanites described in Genesis 15:19. There's not the Kenizzite or Kenite, and that's because if you look at Genesis 25, who resides there? The Ishmaelites, and then you have Midianites and Kenizzites, and these are the same people basically. And the Ishmaelites dwell into Shur, and even to this day they'll say. So you see this red cord, something that you see with the sons of Judah, named Perez. What does that mean, breach? Or is it the Zerah? The other one, breach. I think it was Perez, not breach. And there was that story I was talking about earlier, where the second one, and I already skipped over it lots of times because I can't even remember what it was, but they'll point to certain verses that would make you think that God went out of his way to make sure that the first one didn't get the inheritance and that the second one would. And Cain was the firstborn, and he was jealous. And Ephraim was before Judah, but as Isaiah said, Judah and Ephraim will no longer envy each other. As soon as they went over Jericho, they went straight to they headed north and got a lot of the areas of Samaria, and these are probably later additions coming up in chapters 14 and 15 because this comes from the Southern Kingdom. And the Southern Kingdom comes from these later chapters. And as I was saying about Ezra and all them, the Torah was the main thing, because there's so many different books. apocryphal and pseudepigraphal, and not even the ones that you're thinking of. I mean, when you go look at the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's tons of different books, the patriarchs and all that. So the Torah was something that was seen as being a step above the prophets and all that and the other writings, because it was something that kept true and was the basis and predecessor of all of them. So as this video is Joshua, something that did come from the very first part, has additions even from the second part. They got to throw in the war with Anakin and all their problems with their neighbors that Ezra couldn't seem to avoid. Even though the neighbors seem to be willing to work with Ezra a lot more than Ezra to work with the neighbors. If you look at Joshua 15 verse, let's start with Joshua 14:14. So Joshua 14:14 say, "Therefore Hebron became the inheritance of Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, unto this day, because he wholly followed the Lord God of Israel." So here you have Caleb, the Kenizzite, given a part of Israel, and Rechab seems to be saved, and I mean, she's got to live somewhere, and it goes in a lot of detail about Judah's area, which is not Jerusalem. It goes up to the Valley Hinnom, which is in the south of Jerusalem, but it don't go up to Jerusalem, except for the city of David. The city of David is on the other side of the valley. But the city of David is not Jerusalem. I have a video called "The City of David." Go look at that. And so when Jesus walked from Bethany, which is on the western slope of Mount Olivet, and approached Jerusalem over by the Valley Shinnom and meets the Valley Hinnom on the southeast side, he didn't go all into the city of David. He climbed the steps up the tall face up where they built up the temple really tall. And he especially didn't go to where they call the city of David and the tomb of David and the upper room and all that, which is at the Dung Gate, which is way further away. So, this Palm Sunday right here, Palm Sunday, he would be coming from in the same day, because they say he healed Lazarus in Bethany on Sunday, and he entered on Sundays, because they said he healed Lazarus 6 days before Passover, and Passover was the Saturday. The preparation day was the Friday. And so, according to St. John, so they say, his name is, it was really anonymous. The Gospel of John was anonymous. So here they are in Kadesh Barnea, and this is, pretty much Esau's territory, because you got to understand that there's no place like the Jordan River on earth, because it empties into the Dead Sea. So if it empties into the Dead Sea, there's no place like it on earth, because rivers empty out into the sea. And if they empty out to the sea at the river mouth, then all that was in the water, all that fresh water from the glaciers and snow peaks, dissipates in the rain into the ocean and the sea levels rise, and that's just a matter of time. That just happening more and more. So the Galilee area and all that was probably much bigger than it was now. It's little pilly in the Dead Sea. Um, the Israelis done watered it on so much, it's divided into two. It's almost dried up completely. So they're talking about dredging out to the Dead Sea at the Gulf of Aqaba, and that just would be really not prudent because the Dead Sea is not like anywhere else in the world because it's never opened out into the sea. So it already cut through all the mountains, and so there's a cleave at the border of Edom and Judah at the bottom of the Dead Sea historically. So that's the only reason there is a difference between Edom and Jordan. And Edom doesn't really have a border with Moab, so it's really easy to confuse Moab and Edom. But also, a lot of what Judah inherited was Edom. So Edom wasn't only to the east of Judah, it was also to the south of Judah and fed into the land of the Ishmaelites. Now, Judah was just a small area around Bethlehem at first, and David was ruddy like Esau. So he must have, because they say that man was created in Petra, and that's where you have red earth. And so man, who you can see in Numbers 24, um, was supposed to be destroyed by Israel, who were supposed to be like God man. And David was not necessarily one of them. David was against Israel. Saul was the king of Israel, and David played the harp. And if you look at the word harp, it's the word, same word as Canaanite, the same root. And if you go back to Genesis 4, the sons of Cain played the harp. And a lot of these terms that identify with Esau are those that fashioned metal. And Yahweh, as we're going to see, thunder and lightning, as we see in Job and all that, scary Exodus, all the trembling and the shaking of the mountain, and the fire, that's metallurgical. And the metallurgical God, Yahweh, is the fire and brimstone God. And he is known as the sword. So as they were killing people and creating these teraphim, which were shrunken heads that they put gold tongues on to talk from Sheol, um, they they were very zealous and very, they're full of like all kinds of adrenaline and everything from the battles and everything. It was probably pretty crazy. Fashioning steel for the first time in all history, and know that happened 3,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago. That happened, you know, 2,800 years ago, at longest ago. And before that, they were using bronze. I mean, even the Greeks, who were much more sophisticated in the time of Alexander, were still using bronze. It was much easier to use bronze than it was to use steel. So a lot of times a lot of things they probably translate steel or even steel. I mean, steel is much more difficult. But just the idea of a sharp edge, that's something humans have always lacked. You know, they'll say this person slew that person with a rock or something before that, but they don't have nails and teeth capable of killing like an animal would. And so probably just much like the West conquered the world using guns a few hundred years ago, this probably back in the day was how you made all the difference in the world. One tribe had steel, the other tribe didn't. And guess who started to have the metal? Guess who's known as the Bronze Age? If you go look at the artifact of who's got the metal, it's the Persians. So the Persians, it's no surprise we're the good guys at the end of the book, and at the beginning of the book, that's where they came from the beginning. That's where Abraham come from, at the border there. So they want to go out and identify it because actually that edition came from the Chaldeans, the Babylonians, because that's who brought all these stories of the problems with the neighbors, because the people south of them, the Arabs and stuff, were not, um, they did not identify with them. And this isn't, uh, like a lot of Arabia wasn't necessarily even part of the, let's say, if you fast forward just a little bit, it's ancient differences. The Byzantine versus the Sassanid Empire, where Muhammad come from, there was this battle between the Persian East and the Roman West going on for a long time. And they didn't finish compiling all this. We don't have any proof that they had finished all these stories, back before all that started. And that's how you find I can fast forward into the Ketuvim and the JPS right here, and I can show you that they actually in the titles for there's little headings for each chapter and stuff to make it easier to read, so you can flip through and find what you're looking for. They didn't say Romans, and you have 99% of all Protestants going around saying that the Romans are all the way throughout Daniel 2, Daniel 7, whatever. So this problem with the Arabs is something that's more identifiable to Babylonians, because that was their highway. It was across Syria down to this land that wasn't like any other place on earth. When you look at a map, everything around there is desertified. And so, yes, they did control all the way up the Tigris and Euphrates, but this Jordan's a different one coming down altogether. And so, this is all the story of how these people from the Tigris and Euphrates had gone all the way upriver, conquered all that, and went all the way downriver to Jordan. And they straight up say it. That's the path Abraham took. He went all the way from the north side, all the way down to the south side, all the way to Egypt, and come lo and behold, after Josiah and everything, you see the Persians and the Babylonians and the Assyrians and all them even coming down into Africa. So tell me they ain't going to take Jerusalem if they take Africa and Jerusalem's right in between there. And tell me how Alexander the Great can take Egypt and he can take India and everything else. And you never heard of Jerusalem. Tell me where Alexander the Great mentioned Jerusalem at one time. My connection is unstable. Please wait while we try reconnecting. What if I should cut out and start back again? Do you hear me? Man, they probably cut all that out. I don't know if they know what I'm saying too. They be hating on it. So how they finna say? How come Sennacherib don't say that? How come Sennacherib say I smoke Hezekiah if he all died out there? And so it don't make any sense really. They'll say, oh, that was Lachish that he took. Well, he said Hezekiah, and there ain't no evidence that's Lachish at all. So Alexander the Great didn't mention in No Jerusalem. Sennacherib didn't mention No Jerusalem, but it's supposed to be some great place. No, it was way off the beaten path, bound by the Dead Sea. Nobody wanted that, and nobody lived there. But the Canaanites did. At the time that they say Hezekiah did build the tunnel, the pool, and that became big for Judites and stuff like that. And so, but they had come up over and taken it, and we're gonna get there right now. I mean, because it's where we are. We're in Joshua 15. This is when they took it. But they'll tell you was the time that it happened was not the time that actually happened. It's the time that happened. I mean, this happened in different waves. This, just like you kind of allude to in Ezra, it's not like this all could just happen all at once. But Ezra in the Bible that y'all have got the most twisted because they say, oh, the people moved there with the gold. Then they stopped building. They just laid the foundations. Then they built the temple much later. Then they built the walls of the city much later. No, you build the walls, then you bring the gold, then you bring the people. That don't make any sense. Like really. So First Esdras has a much clearer narrative. They didn't stop talking about the wall because Zerubbabel had convinced Darius that he don't need no walls, and even if he had walls, that Darius could go up over them anyway. So you go past Joshua, or I mean halfway through Joshua, and then all of a sudden it switched to talking about the South again, South even Jericho, and so these are later additions. Anytime you see Cariat, that's Arab territory. You talk about in chapter 15, um, Timnah, Seir. These are definitely these lands of Judah that he said butt up to Edom are actually parts of Edom, Zin and all that. And Caleb said he's Smith and Kiriath Sefer, take it away, give it to Achash, my daughter, to wife. So Caleb, say here in chapter 15:13, Caleb the son of Jephunneh got a portion of the children of Judah. So there ain't these divisions that you'll try to say that it's this purity. And we can see coming up here in a little bit, Simeon jump in the mix. So how Simeon one of the 10 lost tribes? And I'll tell you how, because really there's 14 tribes. In one sense. In one sense. And that's how the sense they used it. And the only passage outside the Apocrypha in the Bible that they mention the 10 lost tribes. That's from Second Ezra, and that was a later writing, right before the time of Jesus. Now you have Second Ezra doing all that, but the only time you see it in the Bible is with the 10 pieces of cloth during the time of Rehoboam. Jeroboam. And you'll find all kind of lies in here. They'll tell you that this guy or that guy that's from the south, like down in Kadesh, they'll say, "Oh, he from Hamath." No, he's not from Hamath. Hamath is way in the north. He might have moved from Hamath. There's no reason to confuse those places at all. If you go chapter 16, Joseph, that's all in the north. I mean, Joshua is not written by the Deuteronomists, except for a couple insertions. It's much older. It's from the time, as you go way back, Ephraim was chosen by Jacob, and the Levites were chosen. That Judah is not in the Torah. You have to have a later understanding of how things came to transpire the way they are, and not all this is positive as you would think. They weren't supposed to have a king. They weren't supposed to sacrifice their children, even if they thought it was for their Baal. So he made them change even the word Baal. He made them change all this, but that's not. That was even after the time of Hosea. So this is how we get to identify Judah as being more Deuteronomical, especially as they, through Ezra, and not actually through Ezra, but through Ezra, we can see how this had happened. That there were a crew from Babylon, and I'm not talking about the crew from Babylon that came through Haran in the time of Abraham. I'm talking about much later, 800 some years, or 1,200 years later, you know. And they kept on coming too, because that was the Persians regarded that as their territory, and the West was trying to lay claim, and they was battling back and forth. So all these different ways to try to bring people in. And the last wave before Jesus was the Persian Pharisees, and the Pharisees were not wholly different than, as it had said, the prior waves. They just brought a little bit more newer things that was going on in Persia, and Jesus and the disciples, some of that they confirmed. Jesus confirmed some of that, like the resurrection and the need for a teacher and different things like that. But he said he's the teacher, and that's kind of good because that kind of end the need for teachers thereafter. That's kind of all over and done with, and so you don't need no more teachers after that. I need to see my laundry. So, and by God being king, Jesus being king, you don't need no king neither. But all these so-called messianics, they would want to install a king. How was it supposed to go? Joshua 15, 13. Joshua 15, 13. And Caleb, we read that. 1563. So we've shown that Caleb is a Kenizzite. He's not an Israelite. We go up to 63 here, chapter 15, verse 63. And the Jebusites, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the children of Judah, could not drive them out. But the Jebusites dwelt with the children of Jerusalem unto this day. And I mean, you look at who had the land of the Jebusites, Benjamin, them his wives, they weren't supposed to marry any of the other tribes. And I think all the Benjamin daughters got taken by the other Israelites because they were at war. I'm talking about Judges, chapter 20 and chapter 21. Now, if you look at the land of Simeon, that's down Beersheba. Well, Beersheba, that's back from Genesis and Abraham. Going way back. Well, that's completely encompassed, come to be over a period of time by Judah. Out of the allotment of the children of Judah was the inheritance of children of Simeon. It's part of it. The parts of Judah, chapter 19. So then when they talk about Judah and Benjamin, they're actually forgetting about Simeon. Would they all just died of natural causes and didn't have no fertility rates or something? Like, what's really going on here? Talk to me. So it's still talking about Aaron and all that, but then you see it change after that. When it comes to the Deuteronomist now, after Joshua, you see a big change. It's not as much about the priests. The priests aren't the center of the story anymore. But through the rest of it, they have been. And before I get to Judges, let me roll it back to How to make no notes. How to make no notes. You see, Moses. Moses' dad was a Midian. Moses' father-in-law was a Midianite, which they call Kenizzite, and or Kenite or something like that. So if you say Moses' child is not an Israelite, then you would be following the rabbis that say it inherits through the mother. But I don't see how the rabbis reconcile that with them considering Moses. And I'll tell you how they would try to say that's a lie, that Moses wasn't an Israelite. But it's a right here in the book, if you can read. So they'll play with words. They'll change a vowel or something between Genesis to Judges to make you think, oh yeah, can't be Canaanites, even though the word has Cain right in it. So they've been playing a lot. They've been playing a lot of games with you because they want you to think they got the code cracked. They want you to think every letter they got mapped out and everything. They don't. They wrote it all up in the calendar letter and they say that's how much it's supposed to be. Yep. God decided that. That's how many letters it's supposed to be. Well, that was an afterthought. And they changed it too. You go back 500 years, there was more books. And they totally took God out of Esther. Esther used to have this prayer at the beginning, which is how they always invoked change. But then you go to the shorter version, and they took that out of there. It says almost to say they don't need God; they can do it their own self. Um, Esther got that gush gush to make it so that she can change the world or something. But they ain't going to take Esther's child, even if she has a child by this king, and say, "Oh, let's disown it." I'm a Persian king. Well, that's that cuckoo bird stuff. So when you talk about Herod, Herod, his wife was just as they would say. She was the Jewish princess. Like, legit. That who Herod's wife was. And then they had a daughter. So if you say Jewish come through in the mother, then how come they don't recognize that king? Just like they rebelled against every other king. They were always rebelling. Always in rebellion at every time. And if you go back to Exodus, like I think it was 19, Jethro's still there. Jethro didn't get excommunicated. I mean, there's plenty of obvious scriptures in the Torah we went through that somebody can just wait a few generations, get circumcised, and they're good. That's it. That's all it took. It wasn't like, oh, you're God forever. I mean, but they want you to think like an Ammonite or a Moabite God forever. But I'm trying to show you that it ain't even like that. In Christ's own lineage, he's got Moabite and Ammonite. But we don't know Christ's genetic lineage because in both Luke and Matthew, we have Joseph lineage. And the understanding that socially Joseph was considered his father by the people around him. So they're down in Hebron. And I don't know how they got to hate on the Hivites and the Canaanites if their mother was buried in a cave there, and they come back 400 years later, and they hadn't moved it. They left it, preserved and everything, and respected the grave, that contract 400 years later. I mean, what else could you want? Were they not acting like good neighbors to you? That here they had left the grave undefiled for 400 years, and now you're back 400 years later. You bounce out. You was hungry. You left, and then here you are. 400 years later. The grave that you bought was still there. They respected the contract, and you were saying in verse 13. This is Judges 1:13. And Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Jacob's younger brother, took it and gave it to Arshesh, his daughter, to wife. And gave him Arshesh, his daughter, to wife. So, you know, Caleb wasn't no Israelite. Neither was Elijah. Neither was Elihu. And the rest of them. So you look at verse 21 here, that's Judges 1:21. And the children of Benjamin did not drive out the Jebusites that inhabited Jerusalem, but the Jebusites dwelt with the children of Benjamin in Jerusalem unto this day. So how's it just Israelites? How is it? I mean, they said they'd be a thorn in their side, and they was marrying into them. You don't live in the same. You're going to have these Romeo and Juliet stories arising if you don't stop with the racism within a community. Say in verse 27, but the Canaanites were resolved to dwell in the land, and they became a thorn in their side, supposedly. And say in verse 28, and it came to pass when the Israelites waxed strong that they put Canaanites to taskwork, but in no wise did drive them out. And what happened was with the taskwork is, I think I lost that verse. Or what did it? Let me see here. Did I lose it? All right, we go to 1 Kings chapter 20, and 1 Kings chapter 9, verse 20 to 21. It's 1 Kings chapter 9, verse 20 to 21. And all the people that left of the Amorites and Hittites and Perizzites and Hivites and Jebusites who were not the children of Israel, even their children that were left after them in the land, whom the children of Israel were not able to utterly destroy, of them did Solomon raise a levy of bondservants unto this day. So what happened with these bondservants is that there's an unequal power division. So what happened is, you know how men are dogs, because men are dogs, that they end up taking as wife, like Abraham did, somebody who the right hand possessed is what they did. And you can see this in, I think, Deuteronomy 25, the rules of a slave and stuff like that. And that's what they did with Joshua and all them. They took certain captives as wives, and inasmuch this is actually what you can look at this word Khazar, which is villages that Joshua conquered, is also used in Esther to mean his harem. And so this word of land, meaning that, except for maybe David, who was ultra zealous, when they went and just utterly destroyed the people, they just destroyed the males. They didn't destroy the females. And then the females were absorbed into the nation. So if you think that Israel come from the male line, how do you explain that? How do you explain the fact that you have all these different people coming from all these different nations on the female end of things? And that's how it was understood in the ancient times from the male side, is where the lineage come from. And that's what, because that's where the name came from. They inherit their name um, from their father's name. So we see that they were bonded, they were bonds people, the Canaanites to the Israelites, and it was what you would refer to in Semitic culture as what the right hand possessed. And those they are eligible to go out and unto. And in Hebrew, did they say the word wife? Well, actually, Hebrew doesn't have the word wife. The word in Hebrew for wife is property, and husband is owner. And so that's how Semitic culture was. But there was no jobs for women, and they were owned by the men, and they had no property. And that's how it was in Israelite culture. I mean, she had properties, but not much. Like they wouldn't give her. They give her a little bit, personal property. They didn't give her like investment property, unless like her father died. Then she might get one portion to her brother's two portions or something. And family had to save money. That if she was widowed or unsightly, that they'd have to pay somebody's family to take her. Whereas if she was very beautiful, then their family get paid to have her. And that was just, I mean, it was brutish. It was just a brutish society back then. I mean, and it didn't matter how good it was for society for one man to have many wives and for the other men not to have any wives, because they didn't care. It didn't matter how good those men that didn't have wives were feeling, how good their home economics were. They didn't care about that. It wasn't an issue, because if they just up and died and stopped existing, that was the way God intended it, because God is the God of the living, and the people that are cut off don't have a part in the inheritance, because it was materialism. That's what the ancients viewed God as the giver of material. This is very oriental kind of view of what God's supposed to do, and this is where the prosperity gospel comes from in Christianity. And asceticism is the true Christianity, as the scenes learned from the Qumran, but they weren't as zealous as the Qumran, and they were a little more influenced by some of the later additions coming from the Pharisees, such as resurrection. And the Pharisees had gotten it from the Zoroastrians, and the Zoroastrians came up with that 2,600 years ago, and the Persian Pharisees came 2,300 years ago. So if we could fast forward Judges a little bit, Joshua dies. Tank, did he ever get rest? That's probably the best rest he ever got. So they're still in the north a little bit. Chapter 3. And then I don't even see where they crossed over. But somehow they're in the south and now they're in the east. Cross Jordan against the. See, I don't trust these people. I mean, a lot of the names I think that they try to make up, but they're never going to completely reconcile all these names because that doesn't add up. Really, how they could be moving around that much. They're doing way too much, honestly. I mean, battles take days, and here they are jumping around. I mean, they must have really conquered these areas and had free reign of the area. They're doing a little too much. And so here's Amalek again, and they had said in Exodus that they're going to have Amalek from generation to generation, world without end. So even though they said slew on Amalek, and we're going to see in First Kings, here we have no Amalek, but still war with Amalek, still making Amalek up. They'll call their enemy Amalek, and they still do to this day. People that believe in this stuff are calling anybody Amalek. I mean, it's like calling somebody Nazi. It's like, oh, we don't like you, you're an Amalek. So they conquered the Moabites and the Ammonites. I mean, you ain't going to see those characters again until 1 Samuel 11. But they took out the end of that. So 1 Samuel 12 don't make no sense. The only way you understand how there's just a little area, I forget what they call it, but that there's one little village that have Israelites. When Nahash had conquered all of Ammon, and those are the only ones that have the right eye plucked out. So this is Solomon come from real Ammonites because those ones that little group that got the eye plucked out, that was just the ones who had taken refuge that hadn't got the eye plucked out. There's nobody left with both their eyes. Alright, so here in chapter 12, now Heber the Kenite had severed himself from the Kenites. So it's kind of like the complete opposite of. It's kind of like the complete opposite. It's kind of like the complete opposite of John 6:70, where he had chosen all of them and one of them's a devil, where they're saying that it's not like all the Kenites can be saved. So you can't say that the Kenites are Israelites because it's not like all the Kenites could be saved. It's like the ones that were on our side, just like Rahab. So the ones that is on our side, them could be saved. Now, saying now, Heber the Kenite had severed himself from the Kenites, even from the children of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses. And had pitched his tent as far as Alam Bazananim, which is by Kadesh. Sounds Hebrew to me. Even though he's not one, he's pretty close. Must be the Hebrews adopted the Canaanite language. only thing that makes sense. And you know Esau and Ishmael and all them could talk like to Israel. You know they spoke the same language. And you can see in Isaiah 19:18 that Israel is a Canaanite language, and guess what? They figured out the paleography by now that they'll tell you it's a Canaanite language. Haroshet, what's Haroshet Goyim? The place of the Gentiles? This is weird. They won't tell you where it is, they'll just call it the place of the Gentiles. And so, albeit Sisera fled away from his. So Sisera's this king of the Gentiles or whatever. And he's an enemy. He's Amalek. And anyway, albeit Sisera fled away from. So they had destroyed. They destroyed all of his folk, and now they're chasing after him. And he fled, and he goes and stays with verse 11. Heber the Kenite's house because they got along. He was a friend. Heber the Kenite, even though he was a friend of Israel, he's a friend of Sisera. Sisera is the king of the Gentiles of this city that they're next to, down there in the south. So howbeit Sisera fled away from him to his feet to the tent of Jael, to the wife. So he went to Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, the guy from verse 11. And Jael, that's Ivanka Trump's name. She's really big into Jewish, and that's why they would say it comes from the mother, because they don't want you to think that whatever Jael's child would be, whether it was her husband or this guy, wouldn't be Jewish, because they love Jael. She's a heroine to them, and so they would have to say that her children, whomever they would be Jewish. They wouldn't go nor Esther's children, even if she had children by the king, or Sarah if she had a child by the Pharaoh. Maybe the Pharaoh they wouldn't, but any of these northern guys, yeah, they would still be considered. So that's probably where the Babylonians got that from. This idea that it comes from your mother, from the fact that Sarah could have had children from other men, the way that they were pulling these tricks where she would go in, lay with them, and then the whole place would be plagued with being barren and locusts, and then they'd run out with all the gold, and she'd give it to Abraham. And so he goes into his tent, and here in Judges 4, and she says, Turn in, my Lord. This married woman, her husband's gone, has this guy in his tent, says, Turn in, my Lord. Turn in unto me. Fear not. And he turned in unto her, into the tent, and she covered him with a rug. And he said unto her, Give me, I pray thee, a little water to drink, for I am thirsty. And remember thirsty, like my man Isaac. Isaac was real thirsty, and he found him a little damsel, watering her, doing some chores for her parents. Gave her all this gold and stuff like that, so that he could go in onto her tent or whatever. So she put a rug on him. He said, "For I'm thirsty," and she opened a bottle of milk and gave him a drink, and she covered him. And he said unto her, "Stand in the door of my." She said unto, and he said unto her, "Stand in the door of of the tent. It shall be when any man they come inquire of me, and say, Is there any man here, that thou shalt say, No." Then Jael Haber's wife took a tent pin and took a hammer in her hand and went softly on into him and smote the pin of his temples. And you don't want to be you're getting it in, but they're gonna stick you within. And smote the pin into his temples and pierced it through on the ground, for he was in a deep sleep. Wow. You're wrong for that. Wow. Can you believe that? So he swooned and died? He was swooning back when he was getting it in, but then when he died, he wasn't swooning no more. Hey, look at that word, swoon. I knew English. I've telegraphed before. Specialty. Your answer was goodbye, and there was even postage due. Oh, he fainted. Oh, I'm more used to the colloquial use. Okay. He fainted, then died. That makes sense. And behold, as Breck pursued Sisera, Jael came out to meet him and said, Come in. I mean, the guy was coming anyways. I mean, Breck was coming anyways. She could have just waited till he got there. Come and I will show you the man who you seekest. Behold, Sisera lay dead, and the tent pin was in his temples. So he was subdued that day, Jabin the king of Canaan, before the children of Israel, and the hand of the children of Israel prevailed more and more against Jabin the king of Canaan, till they destroyed Jabin the king of Canaan. So I guess Sisera wasn't the king. I don't know. I have no idea. So just roll it up a little bit. Chapter 5, verse 4. Lord, when thou didst go forth out of Seir, when thou didst march out of the field of Edom, the earth trembled, the heavens also dropped, yea, the clouds dripped with water, the mountains quaked at the presence of the Lord, even Yon Sinai. Yon Sinai. What the heck is Yon Sinai? So the subject straight change. The subject ain't gonna change just like that. It ain't gonna go you, and then all of a sudden change to a different you. The you is Yahweh, and he's saying that he was up on Sinai. We know he was up on Sinai from Exodus. So if he's saying he's at Seir, how are we gonna explain that when they're talking about how Joshua came from Seir, which is Edom, and Caleb and all them? That's where they came from. They didn't take from Egypt. Not that all of them even came from Egypt. They didn't take from Egypt route by the Philistines. No, they went all the way up and around, came up around like this, and around in a really roundabout way. So the subject is you, and he's saying that the Lord came, the same Lord from Sinai. If you look, compare chapter 5, verse 4, chapter 5, verse 5. It's simple. It's the same subject. You. Second person. They don't usually write in second person, but this is second person. You know, you that was at Sinai came out of Moab, Seir, Edom. The other side. Now, as I was saying, the river come down and it cleave. But why does it stop right there? Because there's a big mountain. That's the only natural border between Edom and Judah. And the words in Greek sound very similar. And Moab doesn't really have that much of a border with Edom. So, and then the borders with Ishmael and stuff like that are even more porous across the desert, especially the Kenizzites and you would assume that even if they did conquer all the area, just as the Syrians couldn't take on Jerusalem because it was down in the dusty, and that's where people would take refuge from, that they would just ignore it. Similarly, the Kenizzites and Kenites, they could take refuge out in the wilderness. The Bedouins have probably been there for thousands of years because people aren't going to go conquer that area. There's nothing to conquer. They just scatter and scatter further out, further away from it. And this is what happened to my man's in First Samuel, I think you see an Edomite, even after all the Edomites had been slain, that there was still an Edomite. And that's because they had fled into the wilderness. You know, it's a good place to flee because it was safe, relatively safe, because people didn't cut. You weren't sitting like a duck or a fish in a barrel. You could scatter. That's what the Judites did, as it says under Nebuchadnezzar. A lot of them scattered. You know, I think Jeremiah said he's going to scatter the sheep. And Zechariah said, strike the shepherd and the sheep scatter or something. And so he talks he's going to take down 2 shepherds. What time period is that? Well, it's clearly after the Babylonian time period. So is this what the 2 candlesticks in Zechariah mean, or is this what the 2 witnesses in Revelation mean, or is it both one and the same? Going back to Numbers and Ezekiel. And they're still fighting Canaanites in Megiddo and stuff like this. And that's what thorn in the side mean. They're just always fighting. So Israel is suppressed by Midian.
Not a new sensation. I've done pretty well, I think. But this half-pint imitation put me.
So Israel is suppressed by the Midianites. The Midianites are really easy to confuse with the Kenizzites and stuff. And we're talking about Moses' stepdad, and Moses' children were Israelites. So it didn't matter that their mother was not an Israelite. And even the stepdad was allowed to join in. We'll call him Abu Bakr Jethro Ruel. And the Midianites came up, and the Amalekites, and the children of the east, and they camped against them and destroyed the produce of the earth till they'll come unto Gaza. Wow, they was all the way over by Gaza. So where wasn't they? I mean, if they's all the way over by Gaza, there ain't nothing left over there. So where the Philistines lived in? Philistines must have lived also north of them. They must have had. They didn't have an entrance to the sea. Get out of here. The Philistines had that. So Jerubbaal, but Baal's not the name of God, right? Jerubbaal, Gideon. This right, the Gibeon. Y'all play too much. Go look at Genesis 4 and Genesis 5 and tell me how similar they are. Oh no, the Philistines are teaming up with the Ammonites. What do I want to show y'all? I'm getting bogged down in Judges. Oh, how was it supposed to be here? Actually, I wanted to show you from here from the beginning. So we have Joshua and Judges. Judges 1, 16 to 20. And the people answered and said, Far be it from us that we should forsake the Lord to serve other gods. For our Lord God, he has... Oops. How do we go to our Lord God's Joshua? It's supposed to be in Judges 1, 16. And the children of the Kenite, Moses' father-in-law, went up from the city of palm trees with the children of Judah. The city of palm trees, they used to say on the way to Egypt was very lush. That's changed over time. It's not like that anymore. And with the children of Judah into the wilderness. So Jethro was right with them, and to the south Arad, and they went and dwelt with the people. And Judah went with Simeon his brother. I told you Simeon was there, and they smote the Canaanites, inhabited Sephath, to utterly destroy it. And the name of the city was called Hormah. And Judah took Gaza. So if he took Gaza, how come it only went up into Gaza when they were attacked? With the border thereof, and Ashkelon, with the border thereof, and Ekron, and the border thereof. And the Lord was with Judah, and he drove out the inhabitants of the hill country, for they could not drive out the inhabitants of the valley, because they had chariots of iron. And he gave unto Hebron to Caleb. So Hebron belongs to the Kenizzites, not the Israelites. Let's say right here, Anak. And the children of Benjamin did not drive out the Jebusites and inhabit Jerusalem. They married them. So it can't come from the mother, their ancestry, to be Jewish or whatever. Stop lying. It's cuckoo. How long did I want to stay in First Samuel for? I want to turn this into 2 videos. I'll do I'll just do First Samuel and then into First Samuel. So, what is this? An hour and 20 minutes, just to get from like a few things out of Joshua and Judges and Deuteronomy or something. Mystery's been trying to get to the Acts too, but people don't understand who is at Acts 2 and what the messianic prophecies are. So now I'm thinking if I have to go through the prophets too before I get there. I already started Genesis. I'm page 200 something in the JPS. So I'm not going slow per se. It's just I'm skipping over lots of stuff. let's get it. 1 Samuel 15. Let me pick it up. I really want to skip out at 15. I can always come back while I'm coming back to Samuel for my next video if I miss something. So Samson's kid wouldn't have been Jewish? Probably because his wife was so rich. She might not need Samson that much. I've been ready to show y'all the end of Judges. I'll allude to it, but it's pretty nasty. I don't know if y'all can be ready for this. Okay, what's it say? I'll give you a little taste of it. Chapter 21, verse 20. And they commanded the children of Benjamin, saying, Go and lie in wait in the vineyards. Now, lie in wait is premeditated murder. Premeditated anything. That's the definition of something evil, is to lie in wait. If Cain wasn't lying in wait, that was why he wasn't premeditated. He was brought. He was angry. These girls in the story, they didn't do nothing to them. They didn't do nothing to deserve them lying in wait in the vineyards. And see, and behold, the daughters of Shiloh come out to dance in the dances. Then come out ye of the vineyards, and catch you every man his wife of the daughters of Shiloh. His wife catch you a wife? How are you gonna catch you a wife? How's he gonna catch you a wife? You're gonna have some ropes or something? What the heck? So up here in Shiloh is where they was getting it in. Still, 1 Samuel, the priests, the daughters of Eli, the sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, these lousy scoundrels, these liars, these sons of Belial. But Hannah, she saved the day because she bring her son in as a Nazarite. Well, guess what? That's where the Christians can come in on them, because the whole story had been, before that, about the Levites. And then here it come over the course of time where they have a king anointed by a Nazarite. So is the Nazarite the Melchizedek in a sense? Not the Melchizedek, because only Christ is the Melchizedek, but at this type, this type that's somehow better than the kings, better than the priest that he replaces. He replaces the priest to do to serve a certain function. I mean, they probably went back after the fact, a lot of these Babylonians, and tried to, actually, Ahimelech was his priest, and he was actually descended from Phineas. They'll play all kinds of games. But you see right here, plain as day, right here in the scripture, that it was wicked sons, and then Hannah, just right there. That's the whole point of the story. That's why Samuel come in the picture, is by being a lot better than they were, because his mom had dedicated him as a Nazarite. And I mean, this was just a type for when John the Baptist come on the scene, and he appoints Christ. You see? First Samuel chapter 2, verse 10. They that strive with the Lord shall be broken to pieces. Against them he will thunder in heaven. I told you that this Yahweh was thunder, lightning, brimstone, and steel. I told you. So these kids was getting it in the holies of holies. They weren't even allowed to have anybody go in there, but they thought that was a nice. The girls would go, "Oh, I've never seen it before." Oh, let me see it. And so they was nasty. So he's taking all the girls behind the curtain and everything. And the Lord is just appearing at this. He's not living in it. He appeared to Solomon twice. If he appeared to Solomon twice and he appeared to Samuel, if he's making these appearances, how's he living there? And then Ichabod is born. Do you know what Ichabod means? It means love don't live here no more. Love don't live here anymore. So Ichabod means love don't live here anymore. That's Shiloh. So Shiloh is older than Jerusalem. That's how Ezekiel 23 say your older sister. They were the first to start and they were the first to end. That's the Elohim source. That's the Samaritans. This is Proto-Kumarite. The earliest, these people as they was building up. A lot of them didn't even go to Babylon. I mean, did the North really need to be completely replaced with this replacement theology you all believe in to be properly converted? I mean, how much was their rebellion? It was already with the golden cows and everything. They built one in Dan and the other one to the southwest. So were they really rebelling that much to need to be wholesale replaced? As Ezra would lead you to believe? So for me, one verse. No, I was gonna say one verse where he mentions Israelites. It's just a one little group, maybe a little here or there, but then he would talk about the ones up in Israel as being Samaritans. This belief in the replacement theology. Because the Samaritans, like one in John 4, Jacob's well, they had their tradition, they had their nationality. They went down to Egypt. Joseph went down to Egypt. They had a story. They had a Torah. But these Pharisees come along and say that they're not the real children of Israel, and that neither are the Ishmaelites, and violently forcing their way in and closing the gates. There's not enough room for everybody. There's plenty of room. There's many mansions. There's plenty of dwelling places. So why don't you be a little more shrewd while you're in the world, so that those that are poor and do have a contrite heart might welcome you into their dwelling, because you ain't got one of your own. Luke 16. The Good Samaritan. You ever heard the Good Samaritan? The shrewd servant? They gotta tell you parables so you won't understand. That's why they tell it in parables, so you won't understand. But those that have been given eyes to see, they can understand. You've been given eyes but cannot see if you think that the material is the end goal. It's fleeting, nothing lasts. Don't be worried about he who can kill the body, be worried about he who can kill the soul. Your body doesn't have a soul, it is a soul, it has a body. Alright, well, I'm talking about, no. Okay, let me just get this real quick. Then set to a gent. because it ain't in the JPS. So I mean, if you read the historical, it keep on going. It goes from First Samuel to Kings to Chronicles to Esther to, I mean, then it goes to Maccabees. That's the history. Then it goes to the writings. And Esther was praised strong. Esther was supposed to be in the time of Ahasuerus, like Daniel 9:1 and Ezra 4:6 say. But they want to put it like way later. And try to get it screwed up that people be living in exile when they could be in Jerusalem purposefully. And then not using God to trick kings into breeding with you and then killing all of your enemies. And then having it have nothing to do with the narrative outside of this narrative. First Maccabees, the Gentiles was trying to change everything up in Jerusalem. And these super priests, these Melchizedek priests, and I'm not saying Melchizedek, don't think I'm blasphemous. I know Jesus only Melchizedek, but I'm saying these were all types, before Jesus, to point to Jesus. So that's where Jesus is coming from. He's not the Levitical priest in terms of the Aaronic priest, the high priest, but he's a higher priest. And so here we are in chapter 5, where he's splitting the Ammonites, the Arabs. He fought against the children of Idumea, the Arab, the team. And he's beating them up. He's doing them in. He's putting them to the sword. He's taking what he wants. The spoils, the Khazars, the villages, as he calls them. And as in Joshua and Esther, we see it's harem, which means the daughters. The Nabathites, which are the Nabateans, who Herod ascended to power by making a consort not only of the Jews, but the Romans and the Nabateans and the Edomites. And so his great peacemaking efforts made him very useful to the Romans, because he was able to create peace, Herod was, and build for the Judahites the temple. And this was really what they wanted. And this worked until 67 AD. And then the Sicaries rebelled with their zealotry. Then the Zealots took over. The Jewish Zealots took over. And there's a civil war in the temple. And they were vying for power and succeeding each other by force. And it was brutish. Alright, I'm looking at verse 28 here. This is 1 Maccabees, chapter 5, verse 28. Hereupon Judas and his whole host suddenly by the way of the wilderness unto Basra. You can think about Isaiah and Revelation and realize that this is messianic. Hereupon Judas, the host, turned suddenly by the way of the wilderness unto Basra, in which he had won the city. He slew all the males by the edge of the sword. Males by the edge of the sword. And he took their spoils and burned the city with fire. It was by night in his fortress. Now, if you go to First Kings 14:21. It's First Kings 14:21. Oops. Oh yeah, 11. First Kings 11:15. First Kings 11:15. And it happened. Let's back it up to 14. And the Lord raised up an enemy of Solomon, Eder the Idumean, and Esrom son of Eladay, who dwelt in Ramah, and Adadezzer king of Suba, his master. And the men gathered unto him, and he was head of a conspiracy, and he seized on Damascus. And they were adversaries to Israel all the days of Solomon. And Eder the Idumean was of the royal seed in Idumean. And it happened that after David was utterly destroying Edom, while Joab the captain host was going to bury the dead, when they slew every male in Idumea, So if lineage comes from the mother, then what happens here? Is there even such thing as an Edomite after that? Aren't all the Edomites Israelites anyway? For Joab and all Israel, about 6 months in Idumea until he utterly destroyed every male in Idumea. And I've seen other verses where they'll destroy the females too. David would. David was crazy like that. And David may be a certain Herod, like that. A lot of what we know about David actually comes from Antipater, his father, the founder of the Herodian dynasty. That these legends of this person from the desert that came over after camping out with the enemy to rule Israel is very, very similar. So I don't really see much of a difference between Herod, who was from Edom, which is Esau, red, Edom. I mean, I can go show you from all over, where in the New Testament, where it's rendered Edom, it's Adam. Number 24, they were going to destroy the children of Seth, the humans, the children of Edom, the men. So when they destroyed all the men, the humans, that they were going to replace them. And that's what the Passover lamb is that which was killed so that we may live, is how it's understood. So that's why they drink wine. It's the covenant of blood being shed, which symbolizes the Canaanites' blood, that they had to die so that we can live. And that's how they see it. It's a replacement theology. That we had done good, the Canaanites had done bad, so God gave all the promises to us. And you see this time and time in Genesis. All the legends are the first son being disenfranchised so that the second son can take it. But the understanding of being older is often missed, including in the New Testament, of Shiloh being older in Jerusalem. So the prodigal sons actually had the ages reciprocated, because the understanding is missed most of the time. Now, people are smitten for gazing at the ark. Wow. So David was here in, I don't know, chapter 10 or 11, like playing the flute for his Lord. So David had some chord on his flute. He just go that his Lord saw, the King of Israel, really pleased him. So they had found him out in Edom, David, on the border of Edom, out by Bethlehem, adjacent Edom, I should say, saying, tending to a sheep as a bad would, and he was chosen by Samuel, and he was now the flute player for. And you say, no, he's a harp player. What's the same word in Hebrew? And so it doesn't. We don't know that it was. Jabash Gilead. That's the word I was looking for earlier. I think that's. Yeah, I think that's where. Even though it's here, it's in First Samuel. Oh yeah. I was talking about First Samuel. Yeah, Jabash Gilead. That's the city I was talking about, where the people who still had both their eyes took refuge before Nahash, the Ammonite, took everyone's eyes out. Or one eye and everyone out. So Yahweh supposedly kept filling Saul's heart with anger and hatred. And we see here, and I don't know why he would want that. It's almost like he was trying to get him to fail. Let's say here in chapter 15, verse 6, and Saul said unto the Kenites, go depart, get you down from among the Amalekites. Said, go, he said to the Kenites, go, depart, get you down from among the Amalekites, lest I destroy you with them, for ye showed kindness to the children of Israel when they came out of Egypt. So the Kenites departed from the Amalekites. So they're basically the same people. So Amalek is the son of Esau, y'all want to say, or whatever, when they're basically saying here that they're the same people as the Kenites, who are called Canaanites, and is identified in Chronicles as Rechabites, who we see in Jeremiah 35 is Canaan, Gentiles. So, I mean, this is really interesting stuff. If you look at it right through here, I mean, it's clear. They destroyed all of Amalek, all of it, except for the king and some horses. So they destroyed all of Amalek, except for the king and the horses. Then Samuel go and kill Amalek. Didn't they kill all of Amalek? So when you go around to Esther, how are they gonna have his descendant? How are they gonna have his descendant be Haman? It don't make no sense. That's why when you read the Greek, it says Haman was a Macedonian. Now that makes sense because it's all been about anti-Greekism, anyways, anti-Hellenism. That's what the Bible. That's all that Testament is. It's anti-Hellenism. So when you see all these legends, they're trying to compete with Greek legends because they have an inferiority complex from being replaced, that they have to show how their history is somehow important when it's not even a history, it's just legend like the Greeks, People don't live hundreds of years. It doesn't happen. They don't destroy thousands of people one at a time. You know, it's just. Oh, I like what Samuel say here. Say, for rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as idolatry and teraphim. Well, if they're little household gods, then how is how is that going to be how David hides out from when they looking for him? And they put some donkey hair on the teraphim head, so it looked like he's under bed. If it was a little figurine, that wouldn't make no sense, okay? And here's Samuel coming down on the teraphim. Damn, what'd you say they are? Shema. Jesse had a son named Shema. Where's that name again? The Herodite. Oh, did we already pass Shema the Herodite? I think we already passed that. Man, I missed Shema the Herodite. Did I? See, that's what I mean. I gotta divide these into little parts. If I try to remember everything I done read leading up to this, I'll be on here hours and I don't forget all the things I read, trying to remember all the things I'm gonna say. Already right here, almost 2 hours. How am I gonna go all the way to what did I say? First Kings? I can't get to First Kings. It's already been almost 2 hours. Alright, so we look at chapter 15, verse 6. Go you down, destroy the Amalekites, lest I destroy you with them, for you show kindness to the children of Israel when they came out of. We read that. We already read 15:6. So can we go to 16:12? 16:12 say, and he sent and brought him in. This is to Samuel. Jesse brought him to Samuel. Now he was ruddy and with beautiful eyes and goodly to look upon. That's an Edomite. Beautiful, fair, you know. Ruddy, red. That's how you survive out in the that's how you survive out in the desert. It's you have to have dark skin, you know, ruddy skin. Because David was all in the desert. That's if they don't in Bethlehem they don't have no trees, and he's out taking care of the sheep. He'd have to have his head covered and have skin that could withstand some sunlight. So he would look like an Arab, like people from Jordan. And it came to pass when the evil spirit from God was upon Saul that David took the flute and played it with his hands, so Saul found relief. So God's allowing David to soothe Saul by giving him a note to play that when God made Saul very angry, David was relieving him, which made him really endeared to his son, Jonathan, or something. And Jonathan loved David so much that when Jonathan died, David decided that everybody's name from there on out would be Jonathan or something like that. So and it say about he say he brought you some more. Don't worry. And if we go to 16:16, it say, "Let our Lord now command thy servants that are before thee to seek out a man who is a skillful player of the harp, which is the flute. And it shall be when the evil spirit of God come upon thee, that he shall play it with his hand, and thou shalt be well." Wow. Just wow. Alright, and if we go to 16:12, did I read that? I did. Yeah. Alright, now go to 1742. Say 1742. And the Philistine looked about and saw David. He was disdained him, for he was but a youth and ruddy and with olive fair countenance. So if fair meant white, and how could he be ruddy? And how could the Philistines disdain his skin? Because the Philistines was white. They came from Caftor, which is Greece, which is European. So David's killing all these Philistines. Saul is jealous of David. David prospers. So David goes to Ahimelech and Nod. Nah, I think they mean Nod. I think they mean the wilderness of sin. Because that's where David hung out. He was always down there. That's where he's from. Those are his people. He was down in the desert, over by the Dead Sea. Saul getting paranoid. Now you see Dog here. Dog, the bounty hunter, is actually, you guessed it, folks, an Edomite. So how's he in the Israelite army? If he's an Edomite, how's he the armor bearer, whatever he is? And then when David bring the ark back, where did he put it? At Obed Edom's house. Obed Edom house. You know Abednego? That's Semitic Abed, because Hebrew, modern Hebrew, come from Persian. So Abednego, or Babylon, Chaldean. Abednego means the son of Nebu. Sorry, the slave of Nebu. Abed is Abdu in Arabic, but the U just means of, and in Hebrew they just omit that completely. The Arabic, I like that addition. It's a little easier to understand what they're actually saying. Now, look at 1 Samuel 22:9. It's a we already read that, or I just talked about it or something. Alright, almost done. It's been almost 2 hours, so let's get it. So David is dwelling in Goth. Well, do you know where Goth is? It's not Goth like German. It's Goth, Gath, Gath. That's Philistine. Them Philistines. So if them Philistines, then that's where David lived. He lived with Philistines. After he had been killing all the Philistines, he was living with Philistines. And he's scared. He's scared. That's why he running. He run into the desert where he can flee from Saul and Israel. David is an enemy of Israel. He's a fugitive of the state of Israel. So he's fleeing. And the king of Israel is trying to get him. And he's living with the Philistines. Chapter 27. And the king of the Philistines even trusts David after all the Philistines he killed. Here's the king of the Philistines in chapter 8. He trusts him. And he was going to lead armies of Philistines into battle against Israel. And as we're going to see in the next video, 2 Samuel, he's fighting against Israel again. So before he's king and after he's king, he's fighting against Israel. David. And the only reason he didn't fight against Israel is here right here. And when Saul inquired of the Lord answered him not, neither by his Urim. The Urims don't work, people. So yeah, he down with the Kenizzites and the Kenites. Judah's down with David's down with the Philistines. And the Philistines were going to go to war on his side with him as a leader of one of their armies because they'd seen how good of a soldier he was and stolen the bells of the wife and turned him into stone. But the princes of the Philistines were wroth with him, and the princes of the Philistines said unto him, Make the man return, that he may go back to his place where thou hast appointed him, and let him not go down with us to battle, lest in the battle he become an adversary to us. For wherewith should this fellow reconcile himself unto his Lord? Should it not be with the heads of these men? Is not David of whom they saying to one another, David has slain his thousands? He killed too many Philistines for them to trust him. They didn't trust him completely because that's the only reason they wouldn't let him lead their army, because he was not one of them. But that doesn't mean he was one of the other guys either. David was solo, except for his 37 dudes. And we'll see who his 37 dudes were. They weren't Israelites. I mean, maybe one or two of them was, but they were probably rebel Israelites. They weren't part of Israel because Israel was with the king of Israel, who was Saul. And Shua, which means the grave. It wasn't a real person. They don't name people the grave. Just like Saul's name was the grave. Paul, before he converted. Even his name was a fake name. They don't name people the grave. What his name really was the root of peace, which was not even a true story. Like, he wasn't trying to tell you what his actual name was. It's all alleged. It's all a learning something to learn from. These are all supposed to be examples to us. So when you try to be all literal and think this is just a story of facts, I mean, it's easy to get it twisted because the facts don't even line up. So it's trying to tell you that this old way of doing things, of paranoia and fear of somebody taking your belongings and wanting an earthly king to reign over you so that you didn't have to listen to God and somebody could just give you orders. That was just wrong. It was wrong all around. And there ain't no two ways about it, but people get twisted. They'd be like, oh, the Torah was supposed to make you better or something. But what did Paul say? Paul say it was to increase sin. So if it's increase of sin, it's not supposed to make you better. It's supposed to make you worse, so that you realize the need for mercy and Savior, because He demanded mercy on all people. So to have mercy on people, they need to see their sin. That was what the point is. It wasn't to get them to sin, because how could they see their sin if they weren't sinning? There was no righteousness through the law. It was not the power over sin. The power of sin is the faith, and the law was not faith; it was works. right, Dan. I'm gonna cut it off. Been a couple hours.